Hi, I'm Carmen. I'm with Corporate Banking Singapore. Having no background in banking and finance, were you worried when you first joined UOB as an MA?
Oh yes, I was very worried. There were a lot of anxiety. I didn't know what to expect. After all, I think it's quite natural and normal for a fresh graduate to be worried about their first job, let alone myself who has got very little experience in the banking and finance industry. I had good support from my colleagues. I had good mentorship and guidance from my managers and supervisors. HR also took very good care of the MAs.
Graduating with a music degree, I was naturally very worried when I applied for this job because I might not have the technical skills and knowledge needed for this position. However, a lot of it is actually on-the-job learning. Why did you choose to join the MA program? I wanted a fast-track career in banking, and I wanted first-hand experience across diverse business units. The turning point for me was actually after attending UOB's Career Forum, where I got to meet senior management as well as current MAs. After the forum, they actually left me their contact and took time out of their schedules to meet with me to share more about the bank. So I feel that because I gained so much support and guidance from my seniors, my fellow MA and I actually did up this abbreviation sheet, which we are currently passing on to interns and our juniors.
Can I have it? What's one of your fondest memory as an MA in UOB?
One of my fondest memories in UOB is definitely my regional rotation in Shanghai, where I got to work and live overseas. I got to network with many of my UOB China colleagues who I work very closely with now, and they've become one of my best friends in UOB.
So when I first joined the product structuring team, it was a fairly new team. Over the years, I've seen how the team has grown. The number of products that we are offering has grown from just a couple to now like a whole comprehensive suite, which I'm very proud of. Any advice on how candidates can prepare for the MA program? Show that they can be a team player, work in groups, that they can work with others and others can also work with them.
Be open, be confident, as well as focus on why you're unique and what you can bring to the bank.
Hello, and good afternoon to everyone here on WebEx and on YouTube Live. Welcome to UOB's first campus speaker series on demystifying a career in banking. I'm Songshan, and with me here, I have Eric, our Chief Sustainability Officer and Managing Director of UOB Group Finance.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Eric. We are excited to have you here today, and welcome again to this event. My name is Songshan again, and I'm a first-year management associate in Group Strategy and Transformation, so GSAT for short, and I'm your moderator for today's session. I joined UOB in July 2020, just last year, and since then, I've had diverse rotations in the bank, from taking care of public companies in corporate banking to helping the SME digitize while in UOB's the FinLab, and lastly, and more coincidentally, getting to know Eric while I was in group finance for the last 3 months. Okay, so I guess that's enough about me. Let's shift our focus to what you are here for, and then I can introduce our distinguished speaker to you. For today's session, we'll be listening to Eric as he shares his key takeaways from his personal career journey from a management associate to a managing director. There will also be a Q&A session for you to ask any questions that you have pertaining to this sharing. Since this is a virtual session, so please feel free to share your questions with us anytime throughout the session via the Cisco WebEx Q&A function. However, unfortunately, we won't be able to answer any questions from YouTube Live. Don't be shy and keep the questions coming. Now, let's start the session by introducing our speakers for today. Eric here has been at UOB for close to 8 years now, and he has diverse global experience across 20 countries, with a special focus in Asia, including Japan, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Singapore markets. So without any further ado, let us welcome Eric. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Songshan. Thanks a lot for that very nice introduction.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for joining us again today. I guess for the benefit of our audience here today, they really wanted to see, a snapshot of your career journey from, being a management associate all the way to managing director that you are right now. And I understand that in the early part of your career, you actually started off not in banking, but very interestingly in an MNC. So maybe you would like to share with us a little bit more on the early part of your career first?
Sure. Thanks again, Songshan. So, hi everyone. Thanks a lot for joining our campus speaker series. Glad you're making the time, and hopefully it'll be worth your lunch break. Quick introduction again. My name is Eric Lim, and like Songshan says, I've been with the bank for about 8 years. But as I look back across my history, my career, which is what you're here to hear about, really, it's been a 24-year career, right? And I know for many of you starting out, 24 years sounds like a very long time. I can assure you, looking back, it's all vanished in the blink of an eye, right? As I think about my career of 24 years, I can really kind of break it down into three main chunks. My first 12 years with General Electric. Some of you may know this as the company of Jack Welch fame or Jeff Immelt fame. I spent my first 12 years with GE as well as GE Capital, which to Songshan's point isn't banking, it's industrial as well as financial services. From there, I was largely overseas. And then after my first 12 years with GE, I came back to Singapore. And that's the second part of how I think about my career, the return to Singapore and integration into banking itself. During those 4 years, I spent time at another local bank, not in UOB, as well as with an international bank, right? And then the last stage of my career, which is where we are right now, the last 8 years, I've been with UOB. And currently, as you guys know, I run two portfolios. One is as Chief Sustainability Officer, and the second as Head of Group Finance, reporting to CFO, right? And, that's kind of the three big chunks of my career. Now, if we go right to the beginning again, one of the things Songshan mentioned was the formative years of my career. And I think this is a great place to start because as many of you are looking at, what kind of an organization, industry, as well as the path forward, you want to know what's important for the early years, right? And I will tell you that in the early years, it is about skill set building, right? And what I mean by skill set building is as you take a look at the industries you perhaps want to specialize in the kind of roles you want to specialize in, it's very important to understand that what will distinguish you from the rest of the pack in the early years is the level of competence you have, either technically or being able to understand a business model or being able to communicate the value of your skills or that business model, right? And so skill set building in the early years is critical. And especially in my first 5 years, there was literally nothing I did where I didn't learn a lot from, right? And the question I'm always asked is, how do you know if you're building the right skill sets? And I'm going to give you guys a little tip here, right? It has to do with the sense of comfort or discomfort, right? I'm a huge proponent for the first, 3 to 4 jobs, you should feel extremely uncomfortable around. And when I mean comfortable, it means you're out of your comfort zone. You're not doing something you already know how to do. So you're creating new experiences, new learning, and thickening out your capability in this constructive discomfort kind of environment, right? So that's the first thing I would say it was really important for me in the first part of my career. The second thing that was really important for me in the first part of my career with GE was really finding the right bosses to work for. And this is the second thing I want to quickly share with you guys. It is important to work for the right people, right? The right bosses and the right organization will support you, give you learning opportunities, protect you when you need to be protected, and push you out there to take a level of controlled risk when they view it to be safe, right, for your own learning. So having the right bosses who are willing to partner with you to sponsor and grow you is extremely important as well, right? The third thing I would say is in the first part of my time was I was also quite deliberate, especially towards the end of my 12 years, in what I was trying to do for the next phase of my career. And what I knew towards the end of my 10 to 12 years with GE was number one, I wanted to be in Asia, right? Because I was still in US at that point in time. And I was looking, this was about the 2005, 2006 timeframe. I looked across the world from the US where I was, and I realized China and that growth story was going to be this massive dragon that we had to ride. And I remember telling my wife, honey, we're in the wrong part of the world. We're Singaporean, we're Chinese, we speak Mandarin. You know, we should be back in Asia participating in China-led growth. The second thing I really had realized by that point in time was that I like financial services. And so I wanted to be able to return to Asia in financial services. And what that meant for us was entry into banking, right? And the third thing was I had also determined that I was comfortable being a finance professional, you know, essentially on a finance director or CFO track. And therefore, you know, towards the end of my time in GE, I decided to take a very controversial role, which was a GE Capital consumer finance business in Japan, which is Asia, GE Capital being financial services, as well as it gave me my finance director role, right? Now, why was I able to take that role? Was because that business was in significant financial challenge at that point in time, and it was a target for being sold by GE. And so I decided it would be great to go into that role, get M&A experience while fulfilling all of the other criteria that I was looking for. And I still remember all my friends told me, Eric, don't do it. You know, you're going into a loss-making business. GE's going to sell it. What are you doing? You're going to ruin your career. And I remember saying to my friends, everything you see as what you want to stay away from is everything I'm actually hunting in terms of skill sets and experience. So trust me, I know what I'm doing. Those 3 years I spent in Japan were among the toughest in my career. And this is where I come back to not being comfortable. But it was also the 3 years where I grew the most in my career. And I can very much attribute a lot of the growth that I now have in UOB back in Singapore to being formative in those couple of years that I spent in Japan. So Songshan, that's just a bit of a start to my first 10 to 12 years with GE.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing us through a quick snapshot of your experiences in GE. And very interestingly, what I found surprisingly interesting is the fact that you really got yourself uncomfortable, right? At the in GE when you took on this role that was in a money losing a finance unit in Japan. So maybe I mean if you want you can actually share with us a little bit about what exactly was that why was it so uncomfortable in that 3 years, and
Yeah.
probably what are some of the main takeaways you actually got out of that period of time.
Yeah, Songshan, thank you for that question. Discomfort along a couple of fronts, right? And
Right.
as all of you go along your journey, you will feel component parts of this or all together. The first thing that was very uncomfortable for me was GE was in the business of making a lot of profit in growth markets, right? And
Right.
taking on a business that was not profitable and essentially was kind of under regulatory challenge was very unusual for a GE executive, right? Because GE executives were all about win-win-win, right? And this was a salvage and defend and mitigate kind of business model. So in itself, I wasn't used to a non-growth business. But what made it really, really tough was because the business was under significant profitability pressure, we had to do a lot of restructuring.
Mm.
And during the 3 years we were there as finance director, we had to essentially let a lot of people go, right? And I will tell you that you haven't done the hard work until you've had to, tell someone why their career is at stake and have to deal with the implications of that. At a personal level because of your professional decisions, right? So that's when you begin to grow up and realize that business isn't about business. Business is about people, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of humanity that's involved in it, and so that's really tough work, right? The third that was really tough was we had a very short time to pull off the sale of the business. And, just from a technical amount of work, negotiating with potential buyers in a very complex M&A transaction in a country that's not even, your home base or English speaking, you can imagine the environment challenges were very high. But nonetheless, like I said, I wouldn't want to do it again. I don't think I have the energy for that anymore. But I would never trade those 3 years of experience for anything else. It was horrific, but it was really, really value adding. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine someone who probably started off their career, a few years ago had to do what you have done for the company. That was something that I think really challenges someone to grow, right? So really, really, really value adding. And I think I also understand that, bringing back to the topic of your second message where you said finding the right boss is critical
Yeah.
at times. So how was your, experience, for example, in GE, where you had a really good boss, and how did that shape your experience?
Yeah. So I was really lucky in my early days to have good bosses who, number one, understood that as you grow talent, you need to give them the space to make mistakes, right? And as they make mistakes, that they make mistakes in a controlled environment that is not career limiting or career ending. But then be able to give enough rope and space that you can really go out there, own something for yourself, have a real sense of accomplishment, right? And so for all of you, as you look for your next couple of roles in building out your career, I really do encourage you to understand the culture of an organization and therefore the kind of colleagues and bosses you guys will be working for. You want someone who's supportive. You want someone who will protect, but someone who will stretch, right? You want these three qualities together. In my time after GE and Songshan, this might be a good way to kind of segue into the second part of my career. I decided to return to Singapore. And for about 4 years before I joined UOB, I was working for another local bank as well as another international bank. If you guys go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll very quickly see which banks those are. And I will say that while I learned a lot in terms of banking as well as being reintegrated into the Singapore environment, one of the things I did feel was somewhat lacking was perhaps the quality of my direct bosses, right? And so while I was learning a lot, it also left a bit, I was looking for more in terms of sponsorship and support. And that was essentially what I got when I moved over to UOB 8 years ago, which is why if you guys look at my career, I spent the first 12 years with GE. I spent very short time with two banks in between, and then I spent the last 8 years with UOB. I'm not an organization hopper, but you can tell where I find my home, I find my purpose, I will stay, right? And so, being able to find that supportive, constructive environment is very important, right? In you growing your career, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
And Eric, I mean that sounds definitely like to me at least like a bold step to take in your career, especially jumping from one industry to another industry, right? And it's also across geography. From if I didn't recall wrongly, you were in the States and then you had to fly back. You went to Japan and you had to come back to Singapore.
yeah.
So that transition, I think for many people might be a little bit hard to adjust at times. But maybe you can share with us how did you transition from MSc into a banking industry at that period of time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important for us as we build our careers to understand what our careers are about, right? Um, Now, many of us think of our careers as doing work, right? And getting good at doing work. But that would be a gross simplification and misrepresentation of a full career journey, right? And the way I think at I'm sorry, at UOB, we like to think about a full career is the T, right? So the vertical part of the T is where you build up your skill sets. In my particular case, I built up my skill sets in finance, right? So I'm a finance professional. I'm well-rounded in that area. I know what I'm talking about, and I can go toe-to-toe with the best finance professionals in the industry, right? Then the top part of the T is where as you get more senior in your career, you're building out your visioning skills, your strategy skills, your business understanding skills, your communication skills, your negotiating skills, and your general team leadership skills, right? And so the top part of the T allows you to take your functional skill set and really become a broad organizational leader for the organization you work for. Now, depending on the kind of vertical T you're building, these can be very industry specific or they can be cross industry. And in my particular case, because I chose to focus in being a strong finance professional, finance is a transferable capability across multiple industries. So I could do it in industrial businesses. GE had aircraft engines, medical systems, locomotives, plastics, you name it, you got it, right? Then I used that to move into GE Capital, which is financial services. Then I used it to move into banking, right? And so, that's kind of how I use that skill set. Now, different skill sets may then be more industry specific, right? If you're a asset management or wealth management professional, then you're going to be a lot more banking or asset management or private equity or family office based. But that's okay as long as you understand the skill set you're building and the optionality and potentiality of how you can use it well, right? Um, the second part where I talked about the top part of the T is there are a lot of smart cookies out there. So if for one moment you think that you're going to get to the very top by being smart, I have bad news for you. Smart ain't enough, right? Everybody's smart, everybody's hungry, everybody's driven, right? So what you really have to do is understand almost backwards, right? In terms of career management, almost like a project. You gotta have a kind of sense, right? Over the next 10 to 20 years, where you think you want your career to go. And then you've got to be able to think backwards and say, if, for example, in 15 to 20 years, I might want to be, I don't know, the head of a wealth management business in a financial institution based in Asia, then you can work backwards and say, for me to somewhat move in that direction, I need what kind of training, I need what kind of jobs to gain my experience, I need what kind of exposure in what kind of industry, working for who. And then your career becomes this project that you are doing over a multi-year period, right? Many of us have pulled off projects in school, and we know you don't just fall into an excellent final year paper, right? You have to plan it, you have to think about it, you discuss with your professor, you work with your team, you manage your timeline backwards, and you figure out the component parts you have to piece together. Managing a career is a bigger, more sophisticated version of that, right? And you really just have to own your own career and not fall into this trap of, I've got a degree, I'm smart, I'm willing to work hard. Somehow it's all just going to pan out. It's not going to work that way. Yeah.
Right, Eric. I mean, thanks for the sharing. I especially find the messaging around developing your T to be very relevant to someone who just started off, his career, in that case with me, in UOB. And I took a lot of effort into developing the T, and I think the MA program is one very good way to develop that broad exposure, right? That T you're talking about. Okay, that's very cool, and I think when we take the time frame to a little bit more to the recent development of your professional career, just now you mentioned that after coming back to Singapore, you eventually joined UOB, and very recently, I think you also took on the portfolio of being UOB's Chief Sustainability Officer, and that is something that I think is very refreshing, at least in the banking industry. So maybe you can just share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So you're right. I took on the role of CSO at the beginning of this year, CSO being Chief Sustainability Officer. But the real story here is it didn't just land into my lap at the beginning of this year. The reality is over the last 8 years, while I was focusing obviously on my finance mandate, about 3 to 4 years ago, because we knew that sustainability reporting was going to be a requirement, the management team asked me to be the accountable executive, almost like ECA, extracurricular activity, to take on sustainability reporting as well. And this is what I want to share with all of you as you go on your career. At times like that, you can say no, you can say yes and do a lukewarm job, or you can take it on and try your very, very best, right? And so in the last 3 to 4 years in the background, I've actually been handling sustainability for the bank with no title, with no resources, with no glory, right? If you want to think of it that way. And many of us are very allergic to that, right? Because sometimes we go, why would I do this, right? If what's in it for me? And then you look at your neighbors, your colleagues, and go like, yeah, but they get to, have a easier life, and it's the same pay, and why should I put myself through this misery? And this is where I again come back to don't be comfortable, because if you're looking for comfortable, there are a lot of comfortable people who will not make it to the top, right? So seek that discomfort, seek that value creation, seek that value add, right? And the reality is, having worked this in the background over the last 3 to 4 years, when sustainability became a really big thing in our market, and the management and board decided that they needed a chief sustainability officer, I was already naturally placed to take on that role. Now, that would not have happened if the organization had not asked me to invest extra time and effort over the last 3 years to do this work, right? And so I guess the key message here is it's important to continue to have a growth mindset and continue to expand your capabilities, your expertise, and your exposure. Now, I'm not saying go and do everything, because that is not a good way to use your time. But I am saying don't stay narrow. Don't stay only in your comfort zone. The moment you sense you're not learning, go out and find an adjacent skill, an adjacent area, and get yourself uncomfortable again. Look, I've been working for 24 years. I'm 48 years old. I know by most standards, I'm a dinosaur. But if at 48 years old, I'm still pushing myself every single month, every single quarter, every single year to say, where am I getting slow? Where am I getting irrelevant? Let me push out there and create new skills. Then, all the more with all of you with your lives ahead of you and so much time and energy to be doing the same, right? So that's kind of what the UOB story is. Now, I will say the reason I've been here for 8 years is UOB has created an environment and a culture that allows, professionals like myself to manifest, to feel comfortable taking the right risks, pushing in new areas without feeling psychologically unsafe. And that is a very rare thing, right? That is a very rare thing, to feel like you can grow, take some risk, but have that safety net, catch you when it all doesn't pan out well. And this is where I am very thankful to my management and to my boss for having given me that space, right?
Understand. I mean, as I look back on your career, right, for the past 24 years, you have spent a good chunk, 12 years in GE, followed by sort of pivoting to the banking industry, which is what you have mentioned, right? Finding that adjacent skill set or adjacent job scope that you can actually commit yourself to again. And then now you have been with UOB for like I guess 8 years, and soon enough UOB will probably be the longest serving companies you have worked in.
Yes, that's right.
So right, so congratulations on that. I think that's a very good way
Thank
to
you.
validate UOB's value as well.
That's right.
Yeah, and just now you mentioned, UOB's culture and UOB's people has attracted you, and the fact that UOB has always provided that kind of environment for people to learn. I'm just curious, in your 8 years in UOB, how about the kind of exposures you had in UOB, and how did that also was that an attracting factor for you when you joined
Yes.
UOB?
Definitely. And I'll share an anecdotal story, and you guys can try this on for size, right? It's one of the formative stories about my time with UOB. 8 years ago, when I joined the bank, I had already joined the bank as a managing director, but as a finance professional, my training was not complete. And what I mean by that is in all of my time pre-UOB, I had spent a lot of my time doing business finance as well as performance management, but I had not owned more the governance, legal entity side of things. And I remember my CFO Wi-Fi, when I came in, I sat down with him. The first thing he said to me was, Eric, I know you can do, the performance value-added side of the finance job with the eyes closed, but I want you to actually go and lead the entity reporting, the closing of the legal books, this, and the other, right? And I know it's not something you've done before, which is absolutely why you must go and do it. Because after you've done that for a few years, nobody will ever have a question anymore about the breadth of your skill set, right? And it was that very first conversation 8 years ago that made me realize this is what good bosses do, right? They understand where your strengths are, they understand where your development opportunities are, and they don't use you only for your strengths, right? They leverage your strengths to help you build into where your development opportunities need to be focused on, right? And so, that's that kind of value, right? I think you find in a boss in UOB. The second thing I want to say about UOB that I love, right, is now many of you don't know this, but we have 4 value statements, and it's honorable, enterprising, united, and committed, right? But the top word is honorable. Now, I've been in, US, Europe, Asia. I've worked across multiple organizations. I've seen many, many companies, right? And most companies use the word like, oh, integrity or, et cetera, right? But honorable, as you guys know, is almost an old world word, right? Honorable is a word that our parents teach us, right? How do you be an honorable person? How do you be a good person, right? And it really strikes me that in UOB, we don't use legalistic words. We use value type words, which is honorable. And it really resonates with me because this is what my parents taught me when I was young, right? And so I like the fact that, I get to wake up every day, come to a bank where its most foundational value resonates with my value, which is to do the right thing. We're going to be honorable. We're going to take care of our colleagues. We're going to take care of our customers. I like that a lot, right? Then, in terms of other formative experiences, because of the exposure that the management team has allowed me to have, I've been able to obviously spend a lot of time with board members, understanding their perspective, with CEO and the senior team, understanding the breadth of our business model, being very broad across ASEAN. We've got Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Myanmar, Vietnam. To the north, we have Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, and we've got branches across Australia to Europe to the US, right? And so, the breadth of the business geographically is very impressive to me, right? And then finally, just the range of our businesses as well. We've got wholesale banking all the way from large corps to small to medium enterprises. Then we move to retail bank where we've got small business owners, mass mass market banking, privileged banking, private bank, and we even have the asset management business as well as impact investing businesses, right? So in my other job of sustainability, it's very easy to bring this whole picture together because we have all the products, reach, and capabilities to be able to drive sustainable development across our segment groups and our markets. So from that standpoint, Songshan, I don't know how to tell you. My last 8 years,
Right.
I could not have gotten the last 8 years pretty much anywhere else. I'm pretty confident of that.
Wow. Thank you, Eric, for the wonderful insights and the experiences that you shared with us today. I think it brought out a lot of good points, especially to people who just about to kickstart their career, especially in banking. So when I think back on your sharing, things you said about establishing your skill sets both horizontally and vertically, that is critical to someone who just start their career, as well as finding the right bosses and the right environment, one that is conducive for nurturing growth. And lastly, is to be able to grab the opportunity to ride on the mega trend, right? To spot it and be able to leverage on that. That is also something that we need to actively seek as a career beginner. So thank you, Eric, again for the sharing. I think maybe now it will be a good time to answer some of the questions. I see there are some questions that's coming,
Sure.
so we can take some time to probably answer their questions. And again, for everyone else on Webex, keep the questions coming. Use the Q&A function, and we will start by answering. I think there's this question that is that came along the way that says, he or she is someone that has right now a conflict of how to begin his or her career, right? So the conflict is that there's noise that says it might not be advisable to start immediately in banking, and rather, specialize in some other adjacent fields to get a better understanding of other businesses, right, and industries. And for internships, I mean, he or she had, experiences in a lot of industries as well, but eventual goal is still in banking. So maybe you can, share your thoughts on this, especially given your background of transition from MNC to banking, right?
That's right. So that's a good question because it's a real life example, right? I'll share a couple of my thoughts in terms of guiding principles, right? Realizing that whoever's asking this question, they have to make that decision for himself or herself, and it's an important decision, right? The first guiding principle I'm going to say is you want to make sure that you, especially in your few years, you don't become a jack of all trades and master of none. And what I mean by that is sometimes there is this advice that's given that says in your younger years, go and experience a lot of things, right? The risk of that, right, is if you are everything, at the end of the day, you are nothing, right? And that's a balance that you want to be able to think through carefully. Because I have seen folks who perhaps, did 2 years of finance, did 2 years of risk, did 2 years of operations, and did 2 years of channels. And then, after 8 years, when some of their peers have spent maybe, the majority of time becoming a very strong risk professional, a very strong finance professional, a very strong operations professional, suddenly they look back and go like, but I've done all of these things, but they are not deep, right, in anything. And so that's something we do want to think through and be careful about. Doing too many things is not always a good thing. So jack of all trades, master of none is not a very good way to go. Now, is it good to have a range of experiences and exposures? Yes. But at the end of the day, you always want to think, what am I going to be known for? And you want to be known for something, right? So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I would say also is while it may be a viable approach to start outside banking and then come into banking, it is also an equally viable approach to start in banking first, establish your foundation there. And I would say something like the MA program is very good, because what the MA program does is it gives you a view of the entire bank, right? Through rotations, through exposure, through all the training. So it gives you that foundational, oh, this is what a bank does. These are all the aspects of a bank. I get it. Then from there, if you find that, for example, if it was UOB, it wasn't giving you enough a range and breadth, and you really wanted to go, oh, I don't know, join a fintech company, then at least you have that base to move out from. And in the future, if you want to return to the bank, at least you already have that base there, right? And I would say that if longer term you want to be financial services, then I would struggle to understand why you wouldn't join, one of the large, financial services incumbents, dominant players, and start out with that as a career choice. Because if you're thinking about, UOB definitely being one, the conventional banks now have a lot of the component capabilities of even the new economy. So if you think about digital banking, UOB has Tomorrow, which is our digital bank that we launched in Indonesia and Thailand, right? And has been so successful, right? If you think about, the range of wholesale to retail customers, the commercial bank has that. If you think about all the asset management and investing businesses, UOB is one of the rare banks that has an asset management business and a venture management business, right? And so, I think it's important to think through exactly what skill set you're trying to create a reputation around, rather than just kind of take that headline, oh, it's great to go try many different things, because it could all potentially end in tears as well.
Thank you, Eric, for your answer. Hopefully that I think that will be helpful to the people who are thinking about this question. We have another question, and this question actually is really relevant to the role of a chief sustainability officer. So it's actually from Reno from Indonesia, and he would like to ask about the prospect of sustainable financing in ASEAN and how you see this trend as a finance professional, since sometimes green financing term is only used as a gimmick of sorts, and investors themselves come from not environmentally friendly business sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I also see on the chat that Gabriel is asking, Gabriel Go is asking about skill sets along sustainability as well. So maybe let me touch on both, right?
Sure.
So the first question on green finance, a really good question, right? And it shows a level of maturity and sophistication on someone who has been following the field and understands a bit about the opportunity as well as the challenges. So kudos on a well thought through question. The reality is this, right? If you look at where the world needs to go in order to achieve a net zero future by 2050, which, many of you are very sustainability oriented, you're familiar with what the Paris Agreement, the path to net zero, carbon neutrality, you're very familiar with these concepts. So I won't belabor the point. In order to be able to do that, in ASEAN alone, it's expected that there's about $1 trillion worth of annual economic opportunity in investments, industries, etc., that is needs to be put in place for us to be able to reach a sustainable future. And you've got governments who are starting to move in that direction, albeit a bit slowly in Asia, but now slowly picking up speed. You've got companies who understand that their investors and their governments are looking for them to become sustainable. And then you've got asset managers, BlackRock, for example, who say they are only going to start focusing on ESG or sustainable companies, and they're going to start pulling out of unsustainable companies. So actually what's happening here is you're getting some very big, powerful forces across government, asset managers, and companies moving towards a sustainable world. Now, the question is important, right? How do we do that? And the reality of why banking is so important to modern economies is where the money goes, things happen. Where there's no money, things don't. You don't get to build the infrastructure you're looking for, et cetera, right? And if you think about where this $1 trillion worth of opportunities are, it's around four main areas. Number one, power generation. Asia today is predominantly focused on fossil fuels, even in Singapore, we're like 95% gas fired, right? So power generation and mining, right? That's one big area. The second one is around agriculture, right? ASEAN grows a lot of food for the world. I think ASEAN alone grows 40% of all the rice that's consumed in the world. You can imagine the rest of it probably China, right? And so we feed a lot of the world from an agricultural perspective. The third one is we do a lot of manufacturing. So manufacturing in a circular economy within planetary boundaries, that's a very important thing we got to get ASEAN to. And then the fourth one is cities, right? We have a lot of big cities across ASEAN. And cities are really interesting because, they take up 3% of the surface area of the world, but houses 50% of the population. And it's projected that in the next 20 years, it's going to house 70% of the population. And where in the past, you used to see competition between countries, now increasingly, you're starting to see competition between cities because that's where the real power bases of talent, money, influence, competition and industry are, right? So there's a lot of money in these four areas that need to be deployed to build the economy of the future that's much more sustainable. And that's where green finance or sustainable financing becomes really, really important. There was a question on greenwashing. Yes, we have to be very careful around greenwashing. But I think as we continue to develop in this area, the standards will continue to go higher and higher. So I don't think that's something we need to overly worry about, right? In UOB, for example, we adhere to the highest quality standards, right? So we have the right level of certifications, audits, and second-party opinions to make sure that our frameworks are of the highest quality, right? So that's kind of how we address it. Now, to the question on future of sustainability skill sets and careers, I really do think that if you look at the challenge in front of us, there are two big mega trends that are apparent today already that will continue to run for some time. And these are mega trends for the whole world. The first is digital, right? That one you guys are very familiar with already. For most of you, you may not realize that the smartphone, the concept of the smartphone is really only about 15 years old, right? When Apple came out with the first iPhone, that was, I think, in 2006 or 7, maybe, right? And so before that, there was this manual phone that was tied to a house where someone would call a house hoping to find you there. It was super old school. But now with smartphone, not only does the phone go with you everywhere, the phone is your computer, it's your life, it's your profession, it's everything, right? And so digital, we're nowhere close to the end of that megatrend. It will continue to keep going on. The second megatrend is sustainability. Now, for many folks who say, it's going to be a bit of a fad, I don't think so. If you look at the amount of work that needs to be done for us to achieve a net zero world, and if you look at the level of commitment and directionality across the world, I think there's a lot of work that we're only just scratching the surface. When we talk about sustainable finance and greenwashing, no, right? That's the baby part of the conversation, right? We're barely out of kindergarten. There's, primary school, secondary school, and, university for sustainability that, we still got to walk that whole journey. So I think that is a big mega trend that we got to watch. And so looking for a career in sustainability, especially in banking, you can find it in three main routes. One, ESG risk, right? Managing sustainable risk. That tends to be in the risk function. Two, sustainable finance. This is more on the corporate space or in the retail banking space where you are facing off with clients and providing those loans. Third, my route, which is the corporate route, right? As corporate sustainability officer, I have to watch over the entire bank strategy as well as execution, including risk, including delivery to clients, but including our own internal policies, carbon neutrality for our own footprint, the messaging, the branding, the positioning. So the corporate route, which is my route. So, there are 3 routes, right? And I would say in terms of the education there, continue to watch out in this space, because I think Singapore will continue to create more and more sustainability focused courses. And I will encourage you guys to definitely look out and participate in that if sustainability is the career you want to go in. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, for the answer. And personally, I'm just really heartened to know that, I'm working in an organization that doesn't only has been consistently delivering excellent service to our customers, but also has taken a larger national and goal into our consideration, right? Something that's close to
Yeah.
our heart, which is sustainability.
That's right.
Yeah, and actually, there's a lot of questions coming in. I have another question that came from Yanqi, a good question. And this question is about, when you were feeling uncomfortable or frustrated at the beginning of your career, how do you know that you're actually stepping out of your comfort zone? Or could it just be that you're not really fit for this career?
Wow, that I wish I could spend so much more time with all of you at this session, because these are such great questions. And the question is this, right? If you are getting frustrated not frustrated, right? If you're feeling uncomfortable for the right reasons, it's usually because you have identified a skill set or a role you want to get good at, but you're not good at it yet, right? And I'll give you a simple example, right? Like when my CFO 8 years ago told me, hey, go close the legal entity books. For the first 6 months there, I was terrified, right? I never closed a set of books. UOB is a big bank. I need to make sure my board and my CEO, my CFO don't go to jail. There was a lot of discomfort. And what discomfort of that sort makes you do is it makes you learn. It makes you not take things for granted. So I went back and I deep dive into my accounting standards all over again. I sat with my team and had them, walk me through, just account stuff out for me. I need to understand this for myself, right? It's the kind of discomfort that pushes you into more learning, right? And you should be able to feel that discomfort ebb and come down as you begin to increase in your competence. Yeah. So that's the kind of constructive discomfort I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the kind of discomfort where you're just being abused, right? If you're uncomfortable because your boss is yelling at you for being, useless, and your colleagues are, just sabotaging you or being dishonorable, and just non-constructive at all. That's not the kind of discomfort I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about skill set discomfort, right? And you should be able to pivot that into learning and feel your competence grow. Yeah, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. And I'm also equally impressed by the quality of questions we are receiving, actually. So there's also many other questions that ask for probably clarity on the details of MA program. For that, you can actually get in touch with our HR, and our HR department will be more than happy to answer any of the queries that you may have. But at this juncture, looking at time, I think we can probably take another 2 questions before we close our session today. So I have this question that actually come from Isaac. And the question is, of course, Isaac thanked you for sharing first. And then he said, would it be possible to elaborate a little bit on the safety net that makes growth safe in UOB? Is it a UOB cultural tenet, or is this ensured at all levels of management?
Yeah. So the safety net that is somewhat unique to UOB is, if you look at our culture, right? Okay, so maybe let me contrast it, right? I grew up in an organization, GE, that was extremely aggressive, right? It's as American can be. It's as growth oriented it can be, right? And it was hyper competitive to a point where it can be somewhat exhausting, right? Now, it's good for those who make it, but it can also be very harsh, right, for those who can't. I think in UOB, you get a combination of both. In something like the MA program, and I want to say something about the MA program first, right? I was laughing with one of my colleagues the other day when we were looking at the MA qualifications, the selection criteria and the process through which you guys come through. And my joke was, I don't know if I can make the MA program. If I were graduating today and I applied to be an MA in UOB, maybe I can't make it, right? And so, I will say that I think the way the MA program is structured is very high quality. It brings in very, very good talent, right? Now, when you are good talent, half the game is won, right? Because you have the raw material that's required to be successful. What you then need is that polishing cloth. And UOB and the environment is that polishing cloth, right? That helps you kind of shine out that diamond below. So what are the component parts of it? The component parts of it is obviously through the MA program, you get that spread, right, of experiences. But more importantly, the managers that you are placed with, right, are part of the MA rotation type program where they're crafted to give you the right kind of experiences, right? So you're not going to end up in a situation where your manager goes, "Who are you? I don't know what to do with you. Go get me coffee," right? Absolutely not, right? All of these rotations are crafted with a level of safety while giving you stretch experiences, right? Now, does this, that was a really good question. Does it go beyond the MA program? Does it carry on, right? I think starting with the MA program establishes you with a level of familiarity already, that everybody knows you're an MA. So, for example, in finance today, we have many graduated MAs that continue to grow through the ranks with us, and we know who they are, right? And we know that, as we put them in diverse experiences, they may have a couple of tough years where, the growth is so out of the comfort zone, it's very challenging, but that's where we, with that level of institutional knowledge we have, we push them out there so they're uncomfortable, but at the same time, we couch them with that protective ring fence to know that if they were ever to stumble, we'll catch them before they hit the floor, right? And so that's that kind of ecosystem that you'll be able to find with an MA and postgraduate of the MA program. And the last thing I'll do is I'll put it back to culture itself, right? And this was something my head of HR told me when I was taking on the CSO role, right? I'm not sustainability trained, so who's to say I'm qualified to be CSO, right? And this is my uncomfortable zone, right? That I keep telling you guys about. I'm eating my own medicine, right? But what he said to me was, Eric, it is more important than that you do it than that you do it perfectly, right? You're never going to do it perfectly, but the fact that you're willing to do it and the fact that, the management team and board is running defense, offense, 帮你挡风, right? And going to catch you front, back, left, right. You have the amount of support and psychological safety net to push as far as we can, right? And that gave me great comfort and confidence to be able to take on the role.
Thank you, Eric. I mean, that was something I really echo a lot personally as well. The message that we should do it rather than aiming to do it perfectly, right? And I think this brings us to our last question of the day. And for this last question, if I may probably put you on the spot a little bit, this question actually came from Jing Wing. And there's always, the mistake of working with a bank, sort of like it being a golden standard of us, right? Pursuing business degree and stuff like that in finance, especially. So is it really as glamorous as it sounds, or is the banking industry really, that exciting for a success guaranteed industry? But if I may, at this point, I also would like to add another layer to this question. So for, graduates who are looking at very different industries who may not have a goal or that level of clarity into what they want to achieve professionally, do you have any advice on what they can consider in order to aid that decision?
Yeah. So let me start with the first part first, which is banking as fancy and sexy as folks make it out to be, right? I think if you're looking at banking because it's fancy and sexy, I will give you a different perspective, right? I will share with you why I chose financial services. I started out industrial, but I went to financial services and banking, right? And the reason I did that is because there are very few things in the world where every part of your life is integrated with it. Okay. And banking is one of those. Now, you guys may not realize this, but even as you go throughout your day, banking is integrated into every single part of your life, right? Wherever you are right now, either at home or at school or whatever it is, when you wake up in your home, there's a mortgage behind that home, right? When you pay for your bills, there's a payment system behind that. When you do pay now, right, you've got a bank account that's with a bank and a payment rail that links it to other vendors, right? When you decide to buy your first car, you're going to take a car loan, right? When you spend on your credit card, you're using a card facility. When you walk into NUS, NTU, SMU, right? Those buildings are financed by banks, right? And so one of the things that I liked about financial services was money in the modern world is never, ever going away. The modern economy is built on this concept of money, right? And so as long as the modern economy stays, and I'm betting it will, banking, financial services is going to be a long-term ubiquitous part of our lives, right? That's different from, if I decided to go into the lumber industry, right? New material science means I may not use wood anymore, right? Or et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I chose banking. So that's the perspective I like to share with you guys. If you're thinking about coming into a career in financial services and banking, what I want you to get excited about is this field allows you to play everywhere. It is literally unlimited in every part of modern economy and society, right? And whether you want to be a wholesale banker, retail banker, asset management, you want to be a finance guy like me or sustainability officer like me, you get to play everywhere in it, right? So that's the alternate perspective I might pop back to you. Songshan, to your question on, for folks who are thinking about what's the right industry for them to start out with, what was that the question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So the guiding principle, perhaps I want to share is it's good to, number one, look for industries that have a growth potential, obviously, right? And what they may mean is counterintuitive. What it means is the best paying jobs today may not be the best jobs to take, right? Because if you are going into an industry that's paying you a bit more today, but you can see the runway of this industry next 10, 15 years may not be there, you might be pigeonholing yourself into a dead end, right? I would rather, if I were you, go into an industry where I can see a long runway in terms of 10, 20, 30, 40 years, which is how long your career is going to be. And like I made my case, banking, financial services belongs in that kind of an industry, right? The second thing I would say is the role itself is very important, right? It needs to be a role that, again, is going to give you growth opportunities, teach you new things, working for the right boss. And typically, instead of taking the risk with a boss, you want to take the risk, therefore, with an organization and in a program, again, similar to an MBA program, where you know there's a minimum quality as to how the learning process is going to be, right? I wouldn't strongly encourage going for a job that pays you a little bit more in some startup where you may or may not, be able to sustain that level of learning and path, right? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, it makes absolute sense. And I mean, thank you so much for the enriching discussions we had today. And also, thank you for all the amazing questions as well. I mean, due to time constraints, we can only answer as much. So we have actually come to the end of our sessions today. Thank you so much for tuning in to our WebEx and YouTube Live, and I hope you have learned valuable insights about career progression opportunities in banking from Eric's experiences. So to close off, the application for our MA program in Singapore actually starts on 1st August. But since all of you here have taken the time out to be with us today, we are opening an exclusive link to sign up for the program, just for the attendees of our speaker series. So if you are inspired by Eric's session and wish to join us as an MA, please submit an application to us. Also, if you are Singaporean but aren't as keen on the MA program, please also look out for our SG United traineeships. For those who are not graduating yet, you can also apply for our summer internship programs, which will open from 1st September to 30th November 2021. Lastly, if you are interested to find out more about MA programs, do stay tuned for our next speaker series session on the 27th July, where you will hear from past and current MA associates as they share about their own experiences. We'll also be sending a post-event survey to gather your feedback on the sessions after 27 July. With that, we look forward to welcoming you at UOB very soon. Take care and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.